Well, welcome everybody to our online series of videos from the Sunshine Coast Health Centre up here in Powell River, BC, and our series is always on addiction and recovery. Anyway, we've been talking about one of the principles of meaningful living, and this principle is living from the inside out, as opposed to most people in active addiction and early recovery, and they tend to have their orientation to the outside world. And it's the outside world that appears to be dictating almost how they feel, whether they're entertained, whether they're frustrated, whether they're happy, always this outside world. And one of the things that we now know about recovery, it demands a transformation from this orientation to the outside world to the inside world. Just some psychological research. Two of the most famous researchers on this idea are Richard Ryan and Edward Deci, and they've developed self-determination theory. And it appears from the research that contentment, fullness in life seem to be associated with the idea of being self-determining. In other words, it's me who's making the decisions for my life, as opposed to any external thing, such as my parents or the military or my lover or my kids. It's actually coming from inside me. I'm self-determining, right? And so in this little edition, we'll give you 4 little hints on how to pull this off, okay? And the first one is, and this is a really curious one with a lot of our clients, because as I said, people in early recovery tend to be oriented to the external world. So when they do something or make a decision, they have this tendency to want to justify themselves to others. And this is a really interesting phenomenon. This almost need to explain themselves to other people. But it's very typical of people who are oriented to the outside world. The people who are oriented inside are quite confident to think, no, I don't have to explain myself. Unless it's to a judge or something, of course. But they're quite secure in themselves and feel no urgency, no need to explain their behavior, right? So this might be a good thing to get into practice. Every time you feel the urge to justify everything you're doing, maybe pull back and think, well, actually, am I secure about that myself, right? And just start looking into yourself, right? And another idea that is pretty common in early recovery is a lot of people are fascinated by gossip and rumor. Generally speaking, if I don't have much going on inside myself, I'm going to find gossip and rumor really appealing because there's an emotional intensity to it. But it's interesting, again, if you talk to people who are confident, who have their own mission in life, they understand why they're getting up in the morning. Things like gossip and rumor to those people tend to be, they're kind of boring and a waste of time. Yeah, it's interesting, right? And these 2 orientations, right? People who live from the outside in and people who live from the inside out. Right? Or another one. There's a tendency, again, for people in active addiction and early recovery to look to the outside world as the source of suffering. So there's a lot of blaming that tends to go on. And again, this makes perfect sense. If the individual is oriented to the outside world, right, then they're going to have this tendency to think maybe it is the outside world that's causing them all of this suffering, right? But again, if we can live from the inside out, then we might take this all in stride and accept that, yes, there's all sorts of things, sorts of reasons that people suffer in life. Car accidents, maybe my biology gives out, all these things. But if you're anchored inside yourself and you have an acceptance of all these realities, then you'll tend to look inside yourself when you're confronted with something. And this could be, we've seen it, for example, with cancer patients. Yeah, they got cancer, they didn't want it, they didn't ask for it, but now they're stuck with it. And those people with this strong internal orientation it's remarkable how they deal with these terrible diagnoses, and it's really quite inspiring and impressive, actually, but only because they're built up from the inside. And one of the things that I like to promote too is the idea that we're all human. So this is the idea that if you screw up, it's okay to admit it, right? It's part of being human. There's nothing bad about screwing up since everybody does it. But I think in our society we've got this idea that I think it's called accountability. And unfortunately they don't actually use that term, they use responsibility. Who's responsible for breaking the window? And all the kids say, no, not me, he did it. And I think it's a very unfortunate thing in our society. We've got this idea that being responsible is to be accountable. But really, it means a recognition that this is my life and that I'm the author of my life. That's what responsibility is all about. So, as part of my life and as part of being human, I'm going to screw up. It's not the end of the world. People screw up all the time. To err is human, right? And again, a recognition of that. So it's okay to admit to screw-ups because they're very common. And I can tell you, in positions, for example, in the business world, it's often refreshing to hear someone actually own up to something. Okay, so those are 4 little hints. This idea of if you feel the urge to justify yourself, pull back. Maybe you don't really have to. Or if you find rumors and gossip really exciting and interesting, maybe pull back from that as well. To try to inhibit yourself, if you feel this urge to blame something on the outside of you for your suffering, right? Just to pull back on that and say, yeah, my boss is a jerk, but okay, now he's a jerk, now what do I do, right? As opposed to putting all the emphasis on the boss, he's a jerk. And the last thing is just to admit the obvious, and it's okay to screw up, right? So these are, again, a handful of grab bag clues of how you can begin practicing this process of living from the inside out. Anyway, that's it for this version of our online program, and we'll be back next time with a new topic.